with host Stokeley Marshall.
Listeners to Love 101 FM are advised that the views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of Love 101 FM.
Hello and welcome to the award-winning show, The Morning Watch, on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you are overseas and on the move, U.S. listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you are in the UK, 0330-332-6541, or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM Facebook and YouTube Live in the first watch today. The US, Israel, and the proposed plan for Palestine. And in second watch, who is going to preach now? But where is the congregation? For our social media question, we ask, is the church in Jamaica facing more challenges than 30 years ago? Like what? Like what? Share your responses on our Love 101 FM Facebook page and YouTube channel, and also on WhatsApp, 876-9973-125, using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll share your responses later on in the program, but first, as I quote.
The quote for this morning: people with the most scars have the biggest hearts.
You could preach a sermon on this one, Darren.
Indeed.
The most scars? I wonder what they mean by the most. And what are these scars? Scars of
life experiences.
Scars of scars of pain, scars of, you know, and then the author is unknown, so we don't even know who to attribute it to. Some of these very interesting echoes come from the unknowns. I don't know why. Good morning, Darren.
Good morning, sir.
The first watch. We'll be back after this break.
Some say that Psalm 83 is a prophetic window into the motivation of the actors that will attack Israel and try to wipe us out at the end times. It does feel like the end times, doesn't it? But is it really? What's the genesis of the fighting between Israel and Hamas and those who back Hamas? What is the church saying about all that is happening in that little part of the East? Are these the end times? Tuesday, February 18, on The Rock, join guests Dr. Clinton Baldwin and Carrie Heron as they discuss the topic Israel, Hamas, the Church, and End Times. That's The Rock, Tuesday, February 18 at 10 a.m. here on the family station, Love 101.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm Stokeley Marshall. The United States and Israel's prime minister have been in talks as to how to deal with the Palestinian issue. And apparently there is a plan, and the plan is to relocate them permanently. In other words, have them live on different lands. So how would this work? And would it work? Some are asking these questions. We have as guests this morning to discuss what I would regard as a seismic topic. Archbishop Kenneth Richards, Roman Catholic Archbishop of Kingston, and Pastor Everell Edwards, pastor of the Church of the Open Bible, Twickenham Park. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
That's Pastor Edwards?
Yes, sir, it is. Yes.
Archbishop Richards, are you with us yet, sir? Archbishop Richards? Maybe not. Starting with you, Pastor Edwards, we find this a very interesting, very interesting issue. What would you regard, sir, as the Trump proposal, and how do you understand it to be, Pastor Edwards?
Well, it goes straight to the whole issue of a two-party state solution that has long been the aim
You mean
of
a two-state solution?
the two-state solution.
Well,
Um,
it has always been a proposal, but go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, that has always been the aim of
The aim of
international
who? The
community.
aim of internet. The aim of who?
The
The internet.
international community.
The entire
Um,
international
tho-
community.
those
Pastor
no,
Edwards?
no, 1 minute, 1 minute. Those who lead the negotiations, the
All right.
parties who would be affected, have a
Yes.
completely different view.
Yes.
Um, one of those sides holds that Israel should not exist. Um, Israel is bent on secure borders, which
Yes.
I believe is the right of every nation to pursue. How you go about it, though, is another thing. And what we have now as the American aim, it can be seen as totally contradictory, totally against what has been pursued up until now. It seems like a real estate transaction. It takes no thought
Are you,
of
are you
what.
are you making that comment because of who the president is, who is a real estate mogul, Donald Trump?
Well, if you're going to move people out of an area that they have considered to be their home after so many years, to develop
I wonder if it's against
to
President Donald
develop a Riviera,
Trump. Yes.
then something it doesn't sound as if you take the people's aspirations into consideration. And then you can't force people to go where they don't want to go. So that too presents a problem. Jordan and Egypt, who are considered to be the prime targets of taking this relocated Gaza population, are not in favor of the idea. Egypt and
Understood.
Gaza, Egypt, sorry, and Jordan are good friends, we can call them, of the United States, but they have a sympathy towards the Palestinians.
Yes, yes, yes. And I would just wonder if you're taking a swipe at the current president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, when you said sounds like a real estate deal or but
Well, look, we've
yes,
seen real estate developments in other places
yes,
closer to the US.
yes. Pastor Edwards, before we bring in Archbishop Kenneth Richards, who I gather is now online. Good morning, Archbishop. But before we bring you in, Archbishop, Pastor Edwards, sir, in terms of this whole matter of, you said the international community in the main has been in favor of a two-state solution, but what about what some persons will look at the Holy Scriptures and say that certain lands in that part of the world were always meant to be, were designated by God Himself to be the land of the Jewish people? Any thoughts on that, sir?
That does not change. The international community might have a view. We know what was promised to Israel.
Yes. Which is
From
which is what exactly for the
from
benefit of
from
listeners?
from
What
from the
is
Euphrates, from the
yes.
Euphrates to the Great Sea, um, and wherever you put your foot was the promise made to Abraham.
No, the Euphrates is,
Yes,
help us with the geography, Pastor Edos. It wouldn't the Euphrates being what is now known as modern Iraq? Am I correct?
indeed,
Interesting,
indeed.
interesting,
So
interesting.
it is what Israel now occupies is not anything near to what is described in God's promise to Abraham.
And as a pastor, putting you on the spot, Pastor Edwards, as a pastor, who obviously the Bible is your basis for your faith and your you know on how you practice your
In,
religion, Christianity.
indeed,
Do you hold to the view that whatever was promised to the Jews, the Israelis. Not sure sometimes which word to use, but let us say the Israelis for the time being. What was promised to them, as some may say, is set out in the Holy Scriptures, they should get it even now. Do you hold to that view, sir?
I want to think of myself as a realist, given global political considerations.
Okay, you can be a realist, Pastor, in your gut, in your soul, in your spirit.
In my gut,
yes,
I believe that there is space for justice. There are several other large expanses of land. We call them nation states now, that could easily accommodate Israel and its neighbors, the children, if we will call them, of Hagar's descendants.
Pastor Edwards, I'm going to go to Archbishop Richards now. I was hoping you'd answer the question more directly, but alas, but notwithstanding, we have heard your views, sir. Maybe we can expand on that later on in the program this morning in this first watch. But Archbishop Kenneth Richards, good morning, sir.
Good morning. I can hardly hear Pastor Edwards.
I think it's because of the platform on which you are speaking to us now. But essentially, I don't want to paraphrase too much because of time, but essentially, Pastor Edwards pointed to the two-state solution as the international community, as he pointed out, has been positing for the most part. And I pointed to him what the Holy Scriptures appear to be saying about certain lands in that section of the world in the Middle East being designated by God, depending on how you read the Scriptures, but certainly from how I read it, it appears as if certain lands in that part of the world were designated by God for the Jewish people. And you can have disputes about whether it's Jewish or Israelis or whether, it's Judah, but not getting to that conversation right now. But that certain lands are designated for them. And he eventually came down on the point or on the side that he's a realist, and he can expand on that later on. But Archbishop, what are your thoughts on the whole matter of the current Trump proposal for persons to be relocated to lands elsewhere? And how do you understand that, sir?
That is very, very difficult, and it has become more complicated because Egypt is trying to garner what could be described as a geopolitical grouping to counter what the USA is proposing with respect to relocating.
Yes.
Palestinians, and so it's really very difficult. But I was looking at the backgrounds historically, in terms of existence, the Jews, the Israelites, they pre-existed Palestinians by over a millennium, over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
It can even go further back to the time of Abraham, which is about 2,600 years. But the dispersion, the Jews and the Israelites, they dispersed and they dedicated that land, the majority of them. And so the Palestinians, they occupied it for 1,000 years, a millennium. And then with World War I and World War II, the Jews started to go back in Gaza, in that area of the world. And so this is where the conflict exists. And so it's going to be dialogue and diplomacy that's a real solution is going to be made. I don't think it's the land outside what should happen is going to be satisfactory unless it's going to be on the diplomatic grounds. Because both are considered the Zionists or Israel as a political This is all, and we capitalize 1,000 years before you, even though you have been occupying it since there are 1,000 years. And so this is where
Archbishop.
Yes.
Bishop, I'm getting a signal already. We are upon a break already. Never enough time in the morning watch. Hold that thought for a minute because there are a couple of things I want to ask you about what you're saying in terms of diplomacy. Pastor Edwards as well. We will come back to some of your thoughts and considerations after the break. Listeners, please stay with us. Very important topic. We'll be right back at the moment.
Learn more on the go. Discover a new and convenient way to send money abroad with the GK1 app. Download GK1 from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store to send with Western Union today.
The time by Grace Kennedy Remittance is
7:16.
Will that be cash or card?
Card.
You have a supermarket card from Flow too?
Yes. It's just like Flow paying for my groceries.
Sign up for Yard and Road for only $6,300 plus GCT. And you too can get a $10,000 supermarket card. Get Yard and Road, the plan that pays you back. Conditions apply.
Mama work hard, for real. She do the most to send me and my brother go school. So, the dream was always to go to university. Well, I fulfilled 2 dreams with 1 Jane Bank savings plan, you know. I further my education and I make mama proud.
Stop wishing you could. With your Jane Bank savings, you absolutely can. Jane Bank will help you find a way.
Jamaica and its workforce are advancing quickly. Life-changing opportunities are arising. You need training and support. We are the Renewed Heart NSTA Trust, committed to providing new and emerging skills training and opportunities. Come to Heart. We'll help you claim your place in the workforce of the future.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the first watch, and there's a very interesting topic that we're doing here. The U.S., Israel, and the proposed plan for Palestine. Before we continue the conversation, gentlemen, I gather that there is a comment to be played. Is it from one of our listeners? Darren?
Yes, from one of our listeners. Good morning. Blessings to you. 2 main problems for the churches today. Persons have no fear of God. Then those who said from them eye and them knee, they heard that Jesus is coming and all know him can't reach. His coming is as sure as the sunrise, and there is no repentance in the grave. This is from Cherry from Spanish Town.
I see. Very interesting comment that is coming from Cherry in the midst of the first watch, where we're talking about the U.S., Israel, and the proposed plan for Palestine. Of course, our guests are Archbishop Kenneth Richards and Pastor Everald Edwards. Archbishop Kenneth Richards, you're making some comments in relation to the question that was asked of you earlier, sir. What is the Trump proposal plan as you understand it? And you were speaking about, the need for diplomacy. But I want to challenge you, Archbishop Kenneth Richards. Haven't we been trying diplomacy forever? It appears as if diplomacy has gotten us maybe nowhere. And so what we have now is a new U.S. president who has come in sort of like a bull in a china shop. And he has said, well, this is what we're going to do. People should be moved out. As a matter of fact, depending on the media source you look at, because I saw one media source, and it was the new U.S. press secretary speaking. I believe her name is Miss Levitt, Caroline Levitt. I hope I have her name correct. And what she said was interesting. She said that it's a majestic plan. She used the word majestic. Majestic. To move them to a new location, which is better because where they are now is just decimated. You may like her comment, you may not like her comment, but your thoughts, Archbishop?
Well, this is the thing that, that is one of the ways in which or that feedback, that the US proposal is being made. However, I mean, if you have your land or what you think is your own possession, and it was destroyed by hurricane or by war, etc., this tax levy is going to be an option. But I mean, if it is imposed upon you, it's a different thing.
I see.
I mean,
If it is imposed upon you, it is a different thing. I
yes,
see.
I mean,
Yes, and you think it would feel like an imposition on the Palestinians if this were to be done.
Well, it's going to be. It's an imposition. So unless there's dialogue, and if Egypt is taking a stance with respect to that, they are going to be galvanizing a coalition solidarity with other the nations with respect to rebuilding the Gaza area.
Yes.
Then, you know, there's another geopolitical conflict arising there.
I understand. Pastor Edwards, your thoughts? Pastor, are you muted, sir?
Hearing me?
We're hearing you, sir. Please go ahead.
It is noticeable that the proposal
and if I could ask for 1 second, Pastor Edwards, particularly what Archbishop just said in terms of if it is imposed upon you.
Well,
continue, Pastor.
If the Palestinians have been supported in and they have struggled for a homeland that wants the same capital that Israel wants, you understand that this is not just a question of convenience and comfort for them. I'm talking here about what is driving them. While Egypt and Jordan and the Arab countries around are not in favor of the real estate transaction, the Israelis are now offering Palestinians in Gaza as much assistance as they can to help them to move out of the place. That's an offer from the Israeli defense minister. I'm sorry, but it doesn't seem, it would, for Palestinians to accept that in numbers, that would make it worth the while to Israel and the real estate development would be a surprise. Where I see this going is a hardening of the positions. It is going to bring a whole lot of strain on the relationships that exist now. A hardening of positions. People who up until now have not had such a prominent role in the peace pursuit are going to see opportunity here to drive a wedge between the US and its partners in the Middle East, which I'm afraid has more serious implications down the road. The coalitions are going to be changing their makers and their mission.
Pastor Edwards, I did find one source in relation to what I'd quoted in relation to what Caroline Leavitt, yes, that is her correct name, Caroline Leavitt, the current White House press secretary. But in any event, there is one source here that says Trump believes, referring to the U.S. president, believes moving Palestinians to safer areas would be more majestic. President has presented this big new bold idea to secure peace in the Middle East, and he's not going to waver from that, says spokeswoman. U.S. President Donald Trump believes it would be more majestic if Palestinians in the Gaza Strip were relocated to safer areas, the White House said. And this is just one of the sources. This one appears to be from America's Middle East, and it's dated, updated 13th of February 2025, initially written 12th of February 2025, and the writer appears to be Rabia Iqlal Turan, I hope I have pronounced the name correctly. So you don't regard this as being moved to safer areas, and that it would be more majestic to do so, Pastor Edwards?
I doubt it, because it's not so much the safer, more majestic areas that is the principal driving concern of this. And I can understand the president's employees bigging up the plan, but you and I know that when it comes to real estate, there is the seller and the buyer. You cannot get me to buy something that I don't want, but you are going to try your best.
So you continue to refer to it as a real estate deal. Is it really a real estate deal? Pastor Edwards? I mean, if it's a relocation, is that a real estate deal?
Well, again, it's perspective, eh? Some people call it ethnic cleansing. Some people call it a land grab. Some people call it content for the aspirations of the Palestinians. The whole works.
Yes.
There's a spectrum.
And the URL in relation to the article I just looked at is HTTPS, of course, then to www.aa.com.tr. Persons can take a look at that. Very interesting. And there are other sources, by the way, that speak to this relocation. Archbishop Richards, before we wrap, sir, what do you think are the ways forward?
Well, first of all, I mean, as I mentioned, this is a very complex situation, because the Jewish people think that they have right to that land, but they have vacated it, dispersed, and then the Palestinians were occupying it for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, in terms of land challenge, we could say that they want to buy.
These are the descendants of Ishmael, Archbishop.
Correct, right? Yes, so that's the thing.
Yes, and the Jews are the descendants of Isaac.
Very, very complicated. So that is why, if there can be some dialogue and giving and taking on both parts.
Dialogue between the children of Hagar and the children of Sarah, or the descendants of Hagar and the descendants of Sarah.
Right, yes.
Can the two ever really meet in one?
Man, this is and the fact is that they are religious backing for each of their position that makes it intangible. So we just have to pray that something can.
All right, thank you, Archbishop.
We know of a kingdom in which everybody will have one Lord, one King, and that is the day to which we pray and work.
Yes, but we're not there yet in terms of those who are in the land of the living. And those of us who are still in the land of the living, you have some who are saying the descendants of Ishmael should not be there. It is the descendants of Isaac who should be there.
True. That is a challenge we have, my friend.
So what do you see going forward as the answer?
Going forward, there's a group one time that sang there's not going to be any peace until God himself sits at the conference table. This is going to get harder. There are more marked lines to be drawn. The tension is only going to get worse, if you ask me. Like I said, the coalitions are going to change. And
Pastor Edwards, Archbishop Richards, I'm getting a signal only because of time. We have to leave it there today. Well, let us see what comes next in relation to the Trump proposal / plan. Let us see how successful it may be. Unfortunately, we're completely and totally out of time, gentlemen. I want to thank you both for your time and for your thoughts this morning. Very interesting conversation, and I'm sure this kind of discussion will definitely continue. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, good.
Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the morning one.
The time by Gen Bank is
7:30.
Ready to experience 6 times more freshness in your clothes? Try Downy Scent Beads. Its fragrance is so amazing, you'll have to sniff it to believe it. Try Downy Scent Beads today. 6 times more freshness versus using detergent alone.
To make your business explode ready. Register for the MSME Business Roadshow on February 20th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Juicy Empowerment Park, Clarendon. Join the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce in collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank to access MSME support, government incentives, and financing opportunities. Plus, win up to $400,000 in business cash grants. Register now for the MSME Business Roadshow at roadshow.mic.gov.jm. See you there.
Well, if you want buy appliances for your home with the quality high and the price low, get it on Habasco. Get it on Habasco. Habasco. Everything what you need, Habasco. This guaranteed on Habasco. Get it on Habasco. You more. Habasco. Be your home and in your kitchen and all Habasco. The thing that gives you more, Habasco.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. Let's take a look now at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing. And we have here in our news sources to include here the Loop Jamaica News online. It says, PNP to take it to the streets if Portmore becomes a parish. This according to People's National Party General Secretary Dr. Dayton Campbell. We have in the Jamaica Observer, SSL fraud now firmly in the political domain. PNP promises commission of inquiry into missing funds saga. And we turn to the Gleaner. In the Gleaner, Haitian man dies after bar brawl in Portland. A dispute, apparently it's about a dispute between 2 Haitian men outside a bar in Windsor Forest, Eastern Portland, ended with one of them dead on Sunday night. Those and many other stories in our various news sources. Before I continue, you were indicating to me, Darren, that there is another comment to the first watch?
Yes, another comment from Monica. The statement from the White House sounds like the removal of Native Americans from the land to save reservations.
Very interesting, and that, of course, is in relation to the first watch topic. We haven't even got to the second watch yet, but that is the first watch topic. The topic was the U.S., Israel, and the proposed plan for Palestine. Very interesting comment there. Well, coming up next, we'll read for you or share with you some of the feedback from our Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp question, which actually is the church in Jamaica facing more challenges now than 30 years ago? Like what? If you haven't done so yet, leave your responses on our Facebook or YouTube, Love 1FM Jamaica Live, and also WhatsApp comments and voice notes to 876-997-3125 using the hashtag The Morning Watch. We'll be right back.
Some say that Psalm 83 is a prophetic window into the motivation of the actors that will attack Israel and try to wipe us out at the end times. It does feel like the end times, doesn't it? But is it really? What's the genesis of the fighting between Israel and Hamas and those who back Hamas? What is the church saying about all that is happening in that little part of the East? Are these the end times? Tuesday, February 18 on The Rock, join guests Dr. Clinton Baldwin and Carrie Heron as they discuss the topic Israel, Hamas, the Church, and End Times. That's The Rock, Tuesday, February 18 at 10 a.m. here on the family station, Love 101.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We move right into the second watch, and we continue to invite persons to send in their comments in relation to the feedback question. Is the church in Jamaica facing more challenges than 30 years ago? Like what? Well, a recent newspaper headline declared that our traditional churches are facing a crisis. Declining attendance and not enough newly trained clergy. The older ones are retiring or dying, and the younger ones are few and far between. Many pastors, especially in the rural areas, are doubling and tripling up the churches that they are made to lead. And burnout is setting in, where these pastors have to take on multiple duties. And if the pastors are suffering burnout, can you imagine those who are helping the pastors? Because you can't leave those people out as well. A pastor can't necessarily operate on his or her own. They often need assistance from persons who are, sometimes some churches use the term the laity, and oftentimes we forget how much they can be burnt out as well from fatigue. We have as guests this morning to discuss this very interesting but very concerning topic, Pastor Christopher Kennedy, pastor of the Joyland and Abrams Mennonite Churches, St. Elizabeth, and Pastor Luke Smith, youth and worship pastor, Uprising City Church, Montego Bay. Pastor Luke Smith, Pastor Christopher Kennedy, good morning.
Good morning, Sir Stokeley.
Hi, Mr. Controversy. How are you?
Oh, what a pejorative you have landed on me in the second watch. I am highly offended.
That's what makes people listen to you, though.
You're on the morning watch. You're supposed to be interested in controversy. That's correct. That's what makes this such a great program for many of you listening and jumping right into it. Why heed the call with, well, you know what? Pastor Kennedy, since you mentioned controversy, I did not necessarily mean to bring this up, but in my reading and research for this topic, I was presented with two news clips, both I think from the Gleaner. But then I saw another one, which I'm going to make reference to, because I'm wondering if these are not in the articles that I was referring to, that I had been presented with. I should say that clearly. But this one caught my attention, and I wondered if this is a part of the reason why some traditional churches are having a challenge with membership and attracting new members. Maybe the members who are there already won't leave, or less of them will leave, but to draw new members. And you can give me your candid views. You don't have to agree, or you can agree or disagree. This headline is from back in 2017, July 21, 2017, written by Jovan Johnson and Arthur Hall. It says, free up buggery. Leader breaks ranks with many Christian colleagues. It goes on to say, head of the Anglican Church in Jamaica. I gather he's still the head of the Anglican Church. In Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, Bishop Howard Gregory has broken ranks with many of his Christian brethren and urged a parliamentary committee examining the Sexual Offences Act and related laws to recommend the removal of the offence of buggery from the law books. Widen the definition of rape and recognize marital rape. And I thought to myself, if you are trying to attract members, how many members are you going to attract with a headline like this coming from the head of the Anglican Church? I'm not attacking the Anglican Church, not attacking them at all, but I'm just saying, knowing the views of the majority of the Jamaican people, they might say, well, the Pentecostal pastor down the road not talking like this, but we have Bishop Gregory. I hope I didn't get his title wrong. Bishop Howard Gregory is what the article says. Bishop Howard Gregory is expressing sympathy in a particular direction, and most of the persons who may want to join the church, they don't want to hear that. Your thoughts, Pastor Kennedy?
Yeah, well, you see, we're not in a woke culture. The world, 99% of the world is not a woke culture, you see. That might do very well in a woke culture. Jamaica certainly is not a woke culture. And as you said, that is only going to make the church have more problems. Because if the standards outside of the church are higher than the standards inside, we really have a problem. Really have a problem.
I wonder to myself if that could be a contributing factor why people are not rushing to a church like the Anglican church. Not attacking the Anglican church. In fact, my father was Anglican and so was my grandfather. But I'm just saying, persons may be like, well, why should we go to this church that is where the head of it is speaking like this?
Yeah, certainly the Episcopalian church in America, that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't want to go there, especially the Episcopalian church in America and in England, in Britain, of course.
In fact, my paternal grandfather used to actually play the organ in church. Pastor Luke Smith,
yeah, man. And I think one of the things that many of us don't realize is that the average person doesn't really see denomination. So even though this what you're mentioning is specific to the Anglican church, for a lot of average people, it's just the church. And so many other ministries will get bundled, and this lack of oneness in terms of what we are standing for as the body of Christ, I definitely feel like that has a role to play in that lack of interest for a lot of people coming to the church.
Yes. Another thing I noticed in terms of articles, well, certainly in terms of what was presented to me as news clips, one of the issues had to do with some of the, I'm not saying this to, sensationalize anything, but there's been some bad news coming out of the church, a couple of scandals and
definitely
that sort of thing of a sexual nature, and it has created Pastor Luke Smith, your thoughts?
Yeah, we have to be admit that there are definitely some things wrong, and whenever we try to act as if there isn't, I feel like that further erodes our credibility as a ministry, and admitting too that we have an adversary and an accuser, the church, his whole goal, modus operandi is to destroy
the adversary.
Real.
Yes, the devil is adversary.
And so now, whenever we leave any sort of gaps, any foothold, they turn into strongholds, and so that kind of accountability and intentionality in just guarding any area that may fall, I think is so important. But yeah, I definitely think those scandals do a lot in eroding that credibility in the eye of the public. I know we handle it.
Sorry, Pastor Smith. I thought you were through, but thank you, sir. Pastor Kennedy, your thoughts?
Yes, and remember, the unbeliever, because of their sinful nature, will welcome any kind of excuse, not to submit to God. And when you give them that kind of excuse, we're going to have a problem. What the world is fascinated with, continuously through history, has been the person of Jesus Christ. When we don't reflect his character, we're in deep waters.
Another thing I want to bring up, which I saw some reference to it in the news clips, but I want to expand it a little bit. I think I've always wondered if the church was a little bit too quick to shutter its doors during the COVID-19 pandemic, because I've always felt like the church is an essential service. And when the government designated certain sectors to be essential and the church wasn't included, I didn't hear a lot of hue and cry from the clergy about that. Your thoughts, Pastor Smith?
I feel like a part of that too was that many of our churches were not prepared for, what happened even with the pandemic, in terms of being able to offer, online, for example. Many churches started to put that kind of infrastructure in place after the advent of the pandemic, and so I feel like that.
The point I'm making, Pastor Smith, exceptions were made for supermarkets. Okay. The tax office was full, but not churches. Anyway, hold that thought for a moment because we're upon a break. Listeners, please stay with us. We'll be right back on the Morning Watch.
To my amazing son on his wedding day, my heart is full of joy for you. I wish you a lifetime of happiness and a house full of love. Oh, and some kids would be nice. Your mommy will be the kindest, loveliest granny there ever was. Love always, Daddy. I promised him I'd read this to you one day, and here we are.
Thanks, Mommy. Your love lives on with life insurance from Sagicor. Talk to an advisor today.
The February 550 sales event at Home and Things is here. Take $5 off every $50 you spend. Save big on the brands you know and trust. From beautiful Spanish and Brazilian tiles to exquisite bathroom fixtures and faucets from Corona, Moen, and other top brands. Check out stylish doors, windows, paints, and home decor that inspire beauty and elegance. It's the February 550 sales event happening now. Old Hope Road and Thompson Spring Road. Are you looking for modern faucets to transform your home or commercial property? Then Home Faucets is your place to be. We are located at Shop 42 Elite Mall, Caledonia Road, Mandeville, Manchester. We also provide free island-wide next-day delivery. Contact us on Instagram at Home of Faucets, by telephone at 876-492-4810 or homeoffaucets.com. Home of Faucets, contributing to modern satisfaction.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokeley Marshall. We are in the second watch, and the topic is who is going to preach now? But where is the congregation? Our guests are Pastor Christopher Kennedy and Pastor Luke Smith. And just before the break, Pastor Smith, I was asking you about the whole matter of COVID, and some churches appear to just a little bit, it appeared as if some churches or some pastors were a little bit quick to shutter their doors and not seek to include themselves among the essential services. And we had supermarkets open. Sometimes they were full to overflowing, and an exaggeration, by the way. And we had elections were held during the period. We had the tax office being full sometimes. But it appeared as if, the churches were very obedient. In terms of not saying obedience is a bad thing, but you didn't feel the pushback from the church to say, let us be included among the essential services. Pastor Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree. And I guess I don't really have an answer as to why it happened the way that it did. But as I was alluding to, I feel like that lack of preparation, I think, prior to what would come up, played a role in just that kind of passiveness.
And back, I didn't even think of the word passiveness, but that's interesting. But the move to online, which began to take place a little bit more or much more in that period of time, I'm wondering, sir, as a pastor, do you think, or do you have any metrics on whether or not the numbers returning to church have returned to the pre-COVID-19 period?
I don't have anything in writing, but just from observation, I definitely feel like there's a lot of people that have not made that transition back from online yet.
Interesting. Pastor Kennedy?
Yes, I'm getting the same feeling. I guess it differs across denomination. Some have quite come back, but others, still have some lingering behind.
I want to quickly move to the whole matter of pastors now who need to be trained. Pastors retiring, some pastors dying, not enough pastors filling the role of those who were there before. And is it an exaggeration? Well, certainly one of the news clips I looked at didn't seem to think it was an exaggeration, that there is just a shortage of clergy. So in some traditional churches, for example, because the focus appeared to be on them, you would have you would have one pastor. You have one pastor who is essentially stretching his arms across two, three churches on a Sunday, and it can be tiresome, not because they are tired of doing it per se, but because they just have one physical body, and they have to be doing all this work, and then the attendance is sometimes low. There was a photograph and a write-up in one of the articles there where it mentioned, there's a piece there where it mentioned that there were 3 persons in attendance. And one person commented, one member of the clergy commented that sometimes it's him alone, sometimes it's just 2 or 3 members present, numbers of that low amount. Pastor Smith, what is really happening?
I think it's a number of things, to be honest. I heard someone say that succession precedes success. And I think in some ways it's a lack of succession planning, intentional delegation, which will ultimately lead to those gaps, a lack of empowerment of leaders. But I think that there's also a missionary gap. Let me explain. So there are a lot of churches that were started by missionaries. And this is not to bash missionaries in any way.
Yeah.
But when they came with the support of their international donors, etc.
Yeah.
But then it reached to a point where it was time for them to leave. And there was not that intentional empowerment of another. And then that understanding of even congregations around, paying and sustaining a pastor financially and stuff was not taught. And then when they leave, it created like a need to start from the beginning for a pastor that would be empowered in that way. And so that, I feel like that definitely has a role to play, in addition to the other things that I would have mentioned, a lack of empowerment and also the lack of succession planning and intentional delegation. 2 Timothy 2:2 says that the things which you have heard from me among many witnesses, you commit to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And I don't know how intentional we are with that as the church. I'm speaking about the church in general.
I see, not just traditional churches. And Pastor Kennedy, in terms of the matter of succession planning, having enough pastors to minister to the flock, and then also if the congregation itself is declining, where you have situations where just a few members are turning up. In fact, one of the things written in one of the articles was that if the membership is below a certain amount, they don't refer to it as a church in the within their group. They refer to it as a fellowship. Pastor Kennedy.
Yeah, I agree with what Pastor Smith is saying. The whole administrative thing. You know that, for example, there are some denominations, if you don't go to UTC, they don't use, some very, very good preachers, very good ministers that have been trained in the US somewhere else. But if you don't go to UTC, for example, you're not allowed to be. And the people move out, they move away. And if you don't have the same certain kind of ministers, just have one minister, for example, he has 5 churches, only there once for the month, right? And you have other people who could be running the machine, and you don't want them because they don't go to a certain place to study. People who are quite capable. We're going to have certain kind of problems.
And I mean, not throwing any stones at the UTC, but I've heard some persons express concerns as to the kind of views that are taught when you go to UTC, and they might feel that some of those views are not firmly in line with the strict words of the Holy Scriptures, and they have a challenge with some of those thoughts. Your views, Pastor Kenneth?
Yeah, if I could come in here, because St. Paul's Cathedral, at one time some priests came and they parachuted off the cathedral because they're saying they're trying to attract young people to the church. But wherever you see the basic teachings of Christ, things like the Bible being true, its doctrines about hell, that kind of thing. Whenever you have people, ministers, they going away from the basic salvation, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You take a poll in many of these denominations, especially abroad, you see how low the percentages are in terms of the clergy that believes in these things. Wherever that happens, I don't know why people don't see it in Stokeley. Wherever you see these things happening, they die when they don't have the fundamentals, and that is proven over and over again.
All right.
For the benefit of the listeners, in terms of the articles that I was referring to, which I did not name earlier, one is bell tolls for traditional churches. That's a question. Bell tolls for traditional churches, and that's a question. It goes on to say the church will not die, says clergyman, but anthropologist sounds death knell for quiet worship. And this one is dated February 17th, 2025. And the other one is Churches Facing Empty Pulpit Crisis. With many clergymen nearing retirement, few youth stepping forward to shepherd flock. This one has the same date, February 17th, 2025. This one is by Shoshana Small, and the other one that I read earlier, that I referred to earlier, by Rochelle Clayton. Gentlemen, I'm sorry.
I heard somebody from abroad sent me something saying that was in the Gleaner, that one minister was saying, talking about the Genesis myth. The church dies, Stokeley, when these things go on, they die.
You know, I went to a workshop some years ago. It wasn't a church workshop, by the way. It was a secular workshop. And one of the persons was in the room, and she did the same thing. She referred to the Genesis myth. And I felt like I was the lone person in the room who defending the account in Genesis. And I said, you cannot call it a myth.
And what is bad about it is that some people are not waking up to realize that these liberal trends that were so popular in the 20th century, they're outdated. You know, scholarship is moving beyond that since 1969. There's been a revolution in scholarship in terms of the person of Christ and his Jewishness. Those things are the whole time thing. A lot of people don't believe them in the normal traditional framework of Christianity. They don't believe them anymore. And some people feel fascinated with these old time ideas. They're dead.
Yeah. Gentlemen, how do we see the future? Starting with you, Pastor Smith, and then Pastor Kennedy. Pastor Smith, how do we see the future?
There is hope, you know, because I believe that the hope of the church is the hope of the world when it's working right. I believe that 100%. And I feel like we have to be willing to adjust, change the method, never the message though. And even as it relates to like online, for example, the truth is that while we'd prefer to have everybody back physically in the room for church, online is going to be with us. And we have to be willing to make the necessary adjustments, you know, standing firm on the word of God, the authority of the word. But as Paul said, be willing to become all things to all men in order to reach who needs to be reached.
In one of the articles, it was said persons will say they're attending church online, but while they are supposedly online, yes, it's being shown on a screen, but they're cooking. Yeah, attending to that, attending to all manner of things. So their attention is not really fully on the worship.
Fair.
That's so true.
Pastor Kennedy?
That is so true, you know. And if there's one thing, you know, see, the Calvinists have a doctrine where the church is a part of the doctrinal structure, right? And the physical presence of the believers is important. It is doctrinal. You know, when you're going to read a man out of the church, according to Paul, because he's practicing a kind of adultery that not even the Gentiles know. It means that this man's physical presence, that the apostle is saying we must decline. And so this idea of online, I don't think it is very biblical. It is good in the case of a pandemic, and it is good wherever it can shore up people having problems. But listen, just where two or three are gathered together is not just online touching anything. There is supernatural power that is dispensed when the physical body
gathered together, and using those words in their ordinary grammatical meaning, are gathered together means gathering together.
Oh yes, that's what it means. Like, you know, you have manifest presence and you have presence, and it is in the manifest presence that we see the miracles and those kind of things.
True.
I think I'm getting a signal already, but before we wrap today, I just want to quickly ask, is it that we're not seeing a similar phenomenon with declining numbers of clergy and declining numbers of members? Or are we seeing less of this challenge in the non-traditional churches? Your thoughts, gentlemen. Pastor Kennedy?
Yes, that is so true. And as a matter of fact, the newer churches don't have a problem. The very new movements, they have less of the problem.
Yeah, you agree, Pastor Smith?
Yeah, I agree.
Well, there must be a reason. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time and for your thoughts. Never enough time on the morning watch, but very interesting discussion. And of course, discussions like this will always continue. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. And thank you, listeners, for being with us. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, Pastor Kennedy and then Pastor Smith. Join us again tomorrow as we look at other topical and controversial issues. Visit the Love One on the YouTube channel, the FM YouTube channel and Facebook page, and now on TikTok at Love One on FM Jamaica for this and all other Love One on FM programs. Listen to the Morning Watch on our Love 101 app and download it today and stay connected to the family station, Love 101 FM, the #1 gospel station in Jamaica. This has been the Morning Watch. Thanks to our producer Kathy Gale and to our guests. Join me tomorrow as I look at other topical and controversial issues of the day. I am Stokeley Marsh and handing back to Love in the Morning with Darren.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness works to ensure the provision of quality health services and promotes healthy lifestyles and environmental practices for all Jamaicans. The time by the Ministry of Health and Wellness is
8 o'clock, and you're now invited to listen